Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, Dr. David M. Carlisle.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 11th President's Breakfast. On behalf of everyone at Charles R. Drew University, where hearts learn to heal, I just want to say thank you very much for being here. But before acknowledging that I want to begin by acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Gabrielina Tongva, the original peoples of what is known today as Los Angeles. We honor their ancestors and their enduring stewardship of this land, and we pause in gratitude for the foundation they laid long before any of us arrived. It is only fitting that we begin here because the story of Los Angeles has always been shaped by those who came before and those determined to build something better. The story of the city's founding fascinates me. In 1781, 44 pobladores, men, women, and children, recruited from what are now the Mexican states of Sinaloa and Sonora, gathered at the San Gabriel Mission, not too far away, and walked these 17 miles to establish El Pueblo de Nuestra Sonora La Reina de Los Angeles, just a few blocks away from here. Among them were one Spaniard born in New Spain, 9 indigenous people, 8 people of mixed Spanish and African ancestry, and 2 people of full African ancestry, and finally 1 person of mixed Spanish and indigenous descent. In other words, Los Angeles was diverse from its very beginning. But diversity alone does not guarantee equity. In fact, New Spain's racially based caste system was designed to prevent it. And so, from its founding, Los Angeles carried both a promise and a contradiction: diversity alongside hierarchy, and opportunity alongside exclusion. Yet despite those contradictions, LA evolved into a magnetic city defined by optimism and hope. People have always come here believing their lives could be different and better. They came from the Deep South seeking refuge from terror, from Latin America seeking opportunity, and from communities across the world seeking freedom from limitation. That optimism is real, but so is a tension that existed alongside it. Because while Los Angeles offers possibility, access to that possibility has never been evenly distributed. To this day, LA remains one of the most segregated metropolitan regions in the United States. Not always by law, certainly, but by housing, by infrastructure, and by access. We live near one another without truly living with one another. We see inequality up close, but experience it separately. And when prosperity is visible, but out of reach, when hope feels promised but not delivered, and when justice feels delayed and denied, that tension erupts. It erupted in the Chinese massacre of 1871, the Zoot Suit riots of 1943, and the Watts Rebellion of 1965, in the uprising of 1992, and the protest of 2020. Each of these moments forced the city to confront truths it could no longer ignore. For CDU, the most consequential of these moments was the Watts Rebellion of 1965. In its aftermath, it became impossible to ignore what residents had long known. South Los Angeles had been medically abandoned. People were dying not only from violence, but from the absence of health care. Healthcare access, like so many other resources, had been drawn along invisible lines, and this community had been left on the wrong side of them. What emerged from that moment went beyond a call for more services. It was a call for systemic change, a recognition that lasting change would require training health professionals from within the community itself, individuals who understood its realities, its challenges, and its strengths. I want to go off script for a second and say many of our students, many of our audience members are students at Charles R. Drew University who come from these communities. If you're a CDU student, could you just stand up and wave to the audience, students? So these students who represent CDU are an affirmation that CDU was born from that conviction. Not only from a strategic plan, not from a boardroom, but from sorry, we have a teleprompter error, but from a rebellion and a community that refused to accept neglect as its destiny. 5 women led the demand for a hospital and an institution of higher education in South Los Angeles. I'll just read their names because we all need to hear them again. Lillian Mobley, Kathy Green, Mary Henry, Nola Carter, and Johnny Tillman. We are here today thanks to their fierce determination. And that origin story is not just history. It is our foundation and continues to define who we are today. It lives in our mission, in our faculty, and every student who's chosen to pursue healthcare at CDU. And you all just met them. We saw the mission come alive in the summer of 2020. While the world was shutting down, CDU remained active. While our community marched for justice in the streets, our faculty, staff, and students were in those same communities providing COVID-19 tests and delivering vaccinations because we understood that public health crises do not affect all communities equally. Equity requires patience, commitment, and action. And that summer of 2020 made CDU's truth crystal clear. We are protest and medicine. We stand at an important moment today. Across the country, we see debates unfolding about civil rights, about equity, about who should and should not have access to opportunity. These conversations are unsettling. That's why this year, CDU's 60th anniversary year, carries such a profound meaning. Because 60 years later, and against all odds, we are still here, just blocks away from the epicenter of the Los Angeles, the Watts Rebellion. We had an uprising that demands that we exist. We are still training physicians, nurses, and public health professionals who return to serve the communities that need them most, still advancing health equity as a daily responsibility, because health equity is a civil rights issue. Our existence is a civil rights issue. Every degree that we confer is a civil rights act. Every patient cared for by a CDU-trained professional is a civil rights act. So as we examine civil rights in the 21st century this morning, I want to not only look back, but recognize our responsibility in shaping the future. We're not simply witnesses to history, we are its continuation. Thank you very much. So I want to pause for a moment because before we introduce our next speaker, I want to reflect on the fact that we had a very significant transition just a week ago in the midst of Black History Month. We and the world lost the Reverend Jesse Jackson, someone who is a monumental icon in the civil rights struggle, but more than that. He was twice a presidential candidate, a symbol of what it meant to empower communities. And he was there, of course, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated as well. So a moment of silence, please, in the memory of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Thank you very much. So now it is my pleasure to introduce a legendary civil rights activist and community organizer who has championed social justice for over 50 years. This is Ms. Dolores Huerta. Dolores Huerta received the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award from President Clinton in 1998. In 2012, President Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, in recognition of her lifelong dedication to justice, equity, and empowerment. Please welcome Dolores Huerta.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I know we are gathering at a very important time in our lives, in our history of our country, of these United States of America. And it is so good that we're all coming together. And we've got to meet and meet and meet. We've got to confer. We've got to plan and plan and plan. And we've got to act and act and act, okay? This is our mandate right now. Because unfortunately, we're in a situation where the administration of our government wants to take us back to slave days. For all of these decades now, we have been doing away with the legacy of slavery, but now they want to bring it back. They want to bring it back to a time where they could actually continue and very openly discriminate against people of color. And, you know, we have made so much progress, and it's been so difficult. There have been so many martyrs, so many people that have fought and died to get us to the point where we are at now. And so we're going to say, hey, we're not doing that. We're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. And so they are trying to take away the rights that we fought so hard for. They want to take away the Department of Education. They're doing that because in slave days, it was illegal for people to learn how to read and write. And we know that our country right now is plagued by ignorance, just ignorance. People do not know. And they want to continue this. They want to be able to control people and create the division among people that we have right now. And so we are seeing these horrors. They want to do away with the Department of Labor. Right now, they are saying they have done away with the collective bargaining rights of people that work for the federal government, that they have to be at-will employees. That means they could not file a grievance if they've been discriminated, if they have been treated badly at the workplace, that they cannot file any kind of a charge. Okay, so this is so wrong. Essential workers, you know, farm workers, the people that feed us every day, they are trying to lower the wages that they have, even for those workers, at the same time that they are deporting people, putting people into these detention centers. They are bringing in more people from Mexico and other places, but they want to pay them less money. And when we think of essential workers, we think of firemen, we think of policemen. What about the people that feed us, okay? They are the most essential workers. And of course, the treatment of women, the way they treat women. And you know, we have to do more. We have to do more. I know that we're marching, that we are protesting, that we are picketing, we're writing letters to our Congress people, et cetera, but we have to do a lot more. The first group that was attacked by the administration were people, the transgender people. But the defense of them, the silence was deafening. The silence was deafening. And so while many of us here in this room have been out there, we've been having our voices heard, you know, we've been out there making sure that we stand up for our undocumented population who are suffering this horror of this administration. At this time, we also have to stand up for everybody else. And then we have to call out those whose voices are silent. I mentioned the attack on the transgender community. But there are many people that did not speak out. And you know what? If they're not speaking out, let's call them out, okay? Let's call them out. And we've got to say to them, we need your voices. We need you to stand with us. And I'm going to say, especially the religious community. The religious community. They've got to stand up and they've got to fight for women's rights, okay? They've got to fight for women's rights. They've got to fight for transgender rights. They've got to stand up and fight for gay rights. Because we know so many, and we don't like to admit it, but we still have a lot of people in our own communities, our communities of color, that are still confused about the issue of women's right to choose, women's right to abortion. They're still confused about the issue of gay rights, okay? So a lot of our work that we have to do is to continue educating people. And I want to share with you the words of Benito Juarez, the first president of Mexico, after the independence from Spain. He had a great saying. I'm going to say it in Spanish first. El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace. You know, how many children you want to have or not have. You know, that is your business, right? Nobody's business but your own. Who you live with, who you love, who you marry, that is nobody's business but your own, okay? So let's share those words so that we can end the the confusion, and as the cultural, I'm gonna call it fungus that still exists in people's brains because of what they were taught. Because this is a new world right now, and we have a lot of work to do, and we've got to have everybody with us, and we've got to make sure that we continue to fight for our democracy, that we can end the fascism that is currently plaguing us. And we know that that's not going to go away unless everybody gets out there and does everything that they can. And so we have to organize, and then, we have the elections coming up in 2026, and I'm going to say this in Spanish, okay? Tenemos que sacar a esos güeyes del Congreso. In English, it doesn't sound quite as sexy, okay? But it says we have to take all those dumb oxes out of the Congress, okay? And they're the ones, that have authorized all of this terror, using our tax dollars to terrorize our community. Using our tax dollars to terrorize our community and put them in these horrible detention centers. And they're making almost $2 billion in profits on these detention centers. Our tax dollars. So we have such a big fight on our hands, but with the 2026, we're going to have some midterm elections. Every one of us has got to get out there. We've got to recruit. We've got to organize. We've got to get more people on the ground. We've got to get more people to go door to door. We've got democracy work, and we know that it takes a lot of work to save our democracy. But I know that we are all committed to do this, and we're going to make it happen by working as possibly hard as we can. So I would like to ask everybody to please stand up for a second. I know you just sat down not too long ago, okay? But I don't want you to get too comfortable, okay? Okay, so I'm going to ask all the questions, and I know you know the answer, but I want you to shout it really loud so the haters can hear us, okay? All those people out there. So I'm going to ask you, who's got the power? And I want you to yell really, really loud, we've got the power. And then I'm going to say, what kind of power? And I want you to say, people power. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Who's got the power? We got the power. Okay, I think we can do better than that. Okay, let's do it one more time, but a lot louder. Who's got the power? We got the power. What kind of power? People power. So are we going to use our people power to make sure that we change the Congress, that we stop the fascism, that we stop the hate? What do we say? And I want you to join me on this one. We say, yes, we can. Yes, I can. Yes, you can. We say, sí se puede. Okay, let's do it with an organized hand clap, everybody. Let's go. Sí se puede. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. And I know we're going to have a great conference today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I think you just heard and saw why Dolores Huerta is a living legend, an icon, and somebody who we cannot be here today without. So thank you very much, Dolores, for being here. Now, before I introduce our keynote speaker, I want to acknowledge and thank our 60th anniversary President's Breakfast sponsors, the Weingart family. Dignity Health, a member of Common Spirit. Western Alliance Bank. Altamed. The Martin Luther King Community Health Foundation. USI. AOE Consulting. Baker Tilly. Infinite Circulation. RFP Insurance. And I want to introduce and salute our special guest. Sitting next to her is our board chair, and that is John Bacchus. John, can you stand up and wave to the audience? And we are honored to have with Chair Bacchus the incomparable Congresswoman Maxine Waters. And yes, I understand that it's okay to call her Auntie Maxine. Okay. We have the office of Assembly Member Mike Gibson, who is here today. And we have Casey Herving from Supervisor Holly Mitchell's office, the 2nd Supervisorial District. So thank you all for being here today with us. So now I'll go on and say that I'm thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker. Connie Rice is a nationally acclaimed lawyer whose class action cases with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and her own legal firm include the largest civil rights settlement in U.S. history and total over $10 billion in damages and policy changes. Attorney Rice's advocacy has earned over 50 major awards, and the California Law Business Journal ranked her as one of California's top 10 lawyers. In 2014, President Barack Obama appointed Rice to his President's Task Force on the 21st Century Policing for her expertise in gang and American policing. Former LAPD Chief of Police Charlie Beck, whom Rice repeatedly sued before becoming an ally, called her the conscience of Los Angeles. So now please give a great hand and welcome Attorney Connie Rice.
Good morning. And thank you, President Carlisle, for that generous introduction. President Carlisle and Senior Vice President Minifield, distinguished guests, civil rights icons Dolores Huerta and Congresswoman Waters, doctors, students, staff, and my dear friend, General Counsel John Patton, it is truly an honor to be with you this morning, especially today as CDU celebrates its first PhD training program for medicine. Congratulations. And while I'm up here, on behalf of everyone, let me thank the entire medical establishment who put their exhausted bodies on the lines of a pandemic and saved millions of us. Your profession shined. I cannot say mine did. And finally, to Dolores Huerta, Congresswoman Waters, and the late Reverend Jesse Jackson. You all blaze the paths for everyone in this room. We stand on your shoulders and owe you the deepest debt of gratitude. Thank you. Now, today's invitation announced a theme of civil rights in the 21st century. Tavis, Smiley, and Tom Saenz on the panel, who have had the misfortune of working with me for 30 years, will not be surprised that I bothered President Carlisle about the importance of finding the right frame for this morning. Now, the doctors in this room also have to get the right frame, right? If you pick the wrong chapter of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, you'll misdiagnose Jeffrey Dahmer with an eating disorder. Wrong DSM, folks. A serial killer cannibal's problem is not bulimia, all right? And even within the DSM chapter for personality disorders, you also need to know if it's malignant narcissism or morbid narcissism. And some would say that's a useful distinction for understanding some of our current leaders. But I transgress. The DSM chapter for this morning is Constitutional Crisis and Democracy in the Crosshairs. We are no longer in a frame of regular constitutional order or a frame of traditional civil rights. Both are gone. Lucky for you, there's no time for a slog through 50 years of Supreme Court civil rights reversals, which Tom Saenz could do in his sleep, but here's all you need to know. As the court contemplates ending birthright citizenship, we await their latest body blow to what's left of the Great Voting Rights Act. In the past 5 years, the court has ended constitutional protection for a woman's right to control her own body, gave a president absolute immunity for crimes committed in office, ended racial diversity as an educational goal while expanding so-called reverse discrimination, criminalized homeless sleeping in public, ended effective enforcement for the EPA and FDA, and licensed racial profiling for warrantless masked goon squads to snatch suspicious-looking brown people with accents. So to driving while black, we can now add Supreme Court-sanctioned living while brown. And on top of all of this constitutional vandalism, the formerly independent Department of Justice is now the president's public defender and has draped over its entrance a 75-foot banner of his glowering face. What else do you need to know? But you also know we've been here before. Our ancestors have been here before. Since the dark bargains that put slavery and native conquest into our great Constitution, the rhythm of our 250-year crawl toward pluralist democracy has always been one step forward, 5 back. Well, Barack Obama's election was a giant leap forward that sparked 50 back, all the way to the 1850s. Even traditional historians agree that for some, his election triggered panic over the prospect of the United States becoming a majority non-white nation. And that fact apparently sent a third of white America into a psychotic fugue state, plunging them down QAnon wormholes, imagining Jewish lasers changing ballots, falsely blaming and attacking Asian Americans for the pandemic, deciding white men are the real victims of racial discrimination, launching cruel mass deportations and ethnic cleansing campaigns, and reframing slavery as a jobs training program. In my view, this delusional madness merits its own new DSM chapter. And the DSM also needs to recognize a new disorder that strangely affects only one political party. I call it idiopathic liarrhea. We see in today's political conflict echoes of the 1850s, intense polarization and civic collapse. Thankfully, Mitch McConnell has yet to cane Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor, but it's safe to say the State of the Union is crippled by toxic polarization at best. The good news is we do not have a zero-sum, no-compromise, win or submit dilemma like slavery that leaves no choice but civil war. We are, however, back to the 1850s fights over who is an American, who can have power, and who has cultural legitimacy, which, in my view, Bad Bunny's brilliant Super Bowl proposal settled the last one, right? But on January 6th, we saw what the amazing Amanda Gorman called the dark forces that would shatter rather than share the democracy. And some, we are not in a frame of civil rights. We are in a frame of war to save civil rights and freedom. After only 60 years of full participation in democracy, because we weren't a full democracy before the Voting Rights Act, the country installed straight, white, male Christian nationalist bullies bent on shock and awe, destruction of rule of law democracy, and on bulldozing the last 160 years of civil rights and democracy gains. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, we face a more dire version of the choice that Martin Luther King Jr. posed to Harry Belafonte 1 week before King's assassination. King said, "Harry, I fear we are fighting to join a democracy that is a burning house engulfed in the flames of injustice." Belafonte asked, "Then Martin, what is it that we must do?" And King replied, "We must become firemen." Today, I would add, we must also become builders of a rule of law democracy that radically reconstructs society to put human well-being first, end necro-capitalism that kills people, and put universal opportunity and upward mobility at its core. We must become the architects of e pluribus unum, of the many, one democracy. The era of the 1960 Civil Rights Revolution may be over, but its mission is more essential than ever. So we have the right diagnosis. Now what? We have to answer this question. What must we do to extinguish the tiki torch flames of hateocracy and to reignite Lady Liberty's torch for freedom and pluralist democracy? I do not have all of the answers, and this panel and this audience will have much better ideas. But I offer these to jumpstart the discussion. And my apologies for anybody whom I insult. First, get the correct order of battle. In court, we have an order of proof. When you fight a war, you have to have an order of battle. The first order is to get power back. The midterms are do or die. At minimum, we have to take the House. No circular firing squads. No circular firing squads, align, raise money, organize, register, run the right candidates. You know how to do this, get out there and do it. Second, forge of, by, and for the people democracy power coalitions of unlikely allies. The strange committee bedfellows of Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson come to mind. Martin Luther King Jr. understood that epically big stuff like saving democracy and ending slavery don't happen without unlikely allies. In '67, King uncannily predicted that, quote, the poor white man and the poor black man will become obsolete because of automation if they do not band together in a grand political alliance to demand economic justice, both will perish, unquote. Get these coalitions, get the unlikely alliances. You don't have to like these folks, but you do need to band together to get power to end autocracy. 3, don't wait for the midterms. Continue doing the urgent counter-blocking right now. Spike strip ICE, Minnesota and LA strong. Get whistles, websites, wetsuits, Liberty vans, whatever non-violently resist illegal ICE marauding in detention centers. Mobilize every sector, take names of collaborators, file lawsuits, go into lions' dens of hostile media outlets. Get it done, because that is one of the critical big battles that is connected to the ending of autocracy. We don't get to fight all of our individual battles, but this is one that I think is in the order of battle right now. 4, for the foundations in the room, fund the lawyers, grassroots groups, students, and candidates who are holding the battle lines in the courts, the streets, and the state legislatures. Fight voting sabotage early at every level and everywhere, not just in the courts. So number 5, proactively install protocols that limit discretion to nullify votes and demand independent real-time monitors. Things like that you have to think about way ahead of time because once it's done, the courts are too slow to stop it. 6, stop bringing casseroles to a knife fight. And do accurate threat assessment and preemptive action. protect voting rights, but also do rear flank preparation against their plans for stuff that goes way beyond voting rights. They're preparing to use the Doge's stolen data to purge the voter rolls. They have plans for election nullification in key areas. They have plans to have the military seize boxes. Be sure to defang the sleeper cells of election deniers that have been planted in state election offices. Arm voters with the information they need to cast a ballot, and publicize Speaker Johnson's subversive plan to refuse to swear in and seat Democratic Party winners. There's got to be a strategy. We're going to have to shut it down. Do this key, mea culpa. Number 7, own up to the Democratic Party's role in creating reverse Robin Hood policies. Repent and offer big, real, and plausible upward mobility antidotes. We are in this mess in part because both parties, one far more culpable than the other, I agree, but for 70 years through dozens of changes in law and policy, they have created a juggernaut of automated reverse Robin Hood. Through those laws and policies, they funneled mass wealth up to the top 1% from resources that the middle class and poor should have had. They provided stable wealth for donor classes. I'm part of the donor class. They provided stable wealth for me, but they saddled middle class folks with stagnation and created downward mobility for the bottom 40% and inflicted mass incarceration destitution on the poorest 15%. Unacceptable. You've got to own it, and you've got to reverse it. 8, stop sending brain cancer to the beauty shop and show that democratically run governments can deliver and solve problems. I love Dems. I'm not a Democrat because I've sued Democrats for a living. Tom will tell you I even sued my own board members in LDF. I love Yvonne Braithwaite-Burke, but she wasn't doing what we needed to do for the bus riders, so I sued. Love Dems, but too often they offer soaring rhetoric and 2% solutions. Tinker, talk, take photos, and then run for the next office without having solved absolutely nothing. We need to borrow some cojones and solve the damn problems. Voters have to see real progress or the democracy is over. 9, make wealth pay its fair share, but stop the tax and spend stuff. Don't ask middle-class Americans for more money. LA County has $40 billion. If you can't solve problems with that money, go home. The voters gave LA City billions for homelessness, and there's next to nothing to show for it because politicians won't ruffle feathers to create the centralized power structure needed or do the comprehensive strategies that meet the size, scale, and growth of the crisis. If the problems are too big and too hard for you, don't run for office. Government is no longer about just delivering services. It also has to solve chronic, entrenched crises. 10, reverse the perverse incentive labor agreements that we often strike and get government workers out of their silos into cross-sector teams that do holistic, wraparound solutions that complex problems require. Those strategies work. But who wants to work harder? Who wants to change what they know? It's like when nobody in law school taught me how to do violence reduction, but when the community said, I'm putting my kids in the bathtub to have the bullets come through the wall, Ms. Rice, you got to stop the violence. I said, what do I know about stopping? I had to learn. I had to learn about trauma reduction. I had to learn about violence reduction. I had to learn something new. Our government, if 90% of our public money goes to salaries of government workers, you've got to configure their work schedules and what they do differently to solve these problems. 11, and I love unions, my family wouldn't have gotten anywhere without the Teamsters and without the truck drivers' unions. Our families stand on the work of unions. But right now, we've got to reverse the perverse incentive labor agreements. Dems, we're killing our cities. The problems just get worse. The thinking is too small and constipated, and short-term politicians have no incentives to do long-term strategies that these problems require. But they're not going to get any credit down the line because they'll be out of office by the time the solution comes, right? So I don't blame them. But we have to change the incentives, because otherwise government isn't going to do what it needs to do. 11, touch the third rail of fiscal responsibility. The courage to confront fiscal reality is almost non-existent, and the closed Democratic Party public union bubble creates a spiral of dysfunction that will inevitably lead to bankruptcy and secession. You think we have problems now? You need to avoid those third rails. 12, end money as speech and its total corruption of politics. We know what that requires. 13, offer a winning mission and vision for 21st century democracy that includes a revolution in values and reassures everyone fairness, no matter who is in the majority. 14, reignite belief we can build a system worthy of people's trust. And 15, talk in ways that sound like human beings, meet the public where it is. And for God's sake, stop parroting affordability like it's a magic talisman. Chanting affordability without specific and viable remedies that can succeed is what voters can no longer stomach. Show them where's the beef. Moreover, affordability diagnosis is incomplete because it's not just about affordability, it's about viability, livability, and most importantly, upward mobility. 17, run candidates and do tactics developed and tailored by the local culture. Jane Fonda cannot win in Montana. 18, and finally, editing James Carville, it's the winning, stupid. Get practical, strategic, and out of our comfort zones. It's not about expressing our identities or demanding our particular community's rights. You can do slogans that make you feel good, or you can talk in ways that expand the coalition to win power. After that, we can return to our individual agendas. And some, think big, get way out of your comfort zone, go after what it takes to build those power coalitions that win back power in big enough margins so that their sabotage nonsense can't mess with the victory. You don't have to like everyone or agree with everyone in a coalition. I don't like anybody. This is not a family reunion. It's about getting a group that can take and hold power to beat back autocracy. In conclusion, we are not going back. Not to backs of buses, not to back of the line, not back to Mexico, not back to Manzanar, not back to Muslim bans, not back to yellow stars of David, not back in the closet, not back to Chinese exclusion acts, not back to broken treaties, and not back to the back alleys where women and girls die. We will win this war. Because we must. And because our ancestors demand we do. I will end with two inspirational quotes from the prophet of multiracial democracy, the great Martin Luther King Jr. Quote, "We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. We still have a choice, nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. This may well be our last chance to choose between chaos and community." And from the great Thurgood Marshall, quote, "In the chill climate in which we live, we must go against the prevailing wind. Dissent mightily, because America has no choice but to do better. We can run from each other, but we cannot escape each other. Knock down the fences that divide, tear apart the walls that imprison. Reach out. Freedom lies just the other side." Thank you.
Well, that was the incomparable, the great Connie Rice speaking to us again. And now I'll go ahead and introduce the other members of our panel who are here with us today. First, I want to recognize Thomas Saenz, legendary MALDEF attorney. Thomas, thank you very much for being here. Next, we have Joanna Jackson from the Weingart Foundation. Joanna. And somebody that I listen to on the radio very often, Tavis Smiley. Tavis. I'm going to start with some questions for the panelists as we're here. So I'll continue with Attorney Rice. You were talking about the civil rights in the 21st century, and one of the problems that generals in the military often have is they're accused of fighting the last war, and things change. What do we have to do to fight for civil rights more in the 21st century? I know you spoke to that, but what would you add?
I think we got to get out of the denial. It's kind of hard to face that things fell apart and disintegrated so quickly. And I think that too many of us, and because we're so geographically and politically isolated, we can't see the threats coming in from the other camps. And so you've got to get out and infiltrate. And we don't have that kind of, and you've also got to create unlikely contact, not just alliances, but you got to be able to start talking to the people who have decided that you shouldn't be here. And that's very hard to do, and there aren't a lot of us who can do that. But we're not on the verge of civil war. This is, as I said, it's not so zero-sum. We've got choices here, but we're going to have to get out of our comfort zones. I think that there's some basics. If we don't get the money out of politics, we don't have elections. We have optional confirmations of prepaid for agendas from plutocrats. You know, we just don't have, we have not achieved democracy. The Voting Rights Act was just a down payment, and now that's gone. So we need a vision. What's going to be the Project 2028 that not only charts that path for full e pluribus unum, pluralistic democracy. I don't just say multiracial because it's beyond race. It's everybody, okay? So pluralism, we don't have the blueprint, we don't have the battle plan, and we keep talking about tinkering with what is. Is this time to reimagine? When the stuff gets blown up, start over. You know, when there's destruction, there's also great opportunity, and we're not taking that opportunity. What are we going to replace it with? We need to be ready on day one, not just to roll back and take Trump's name off of every building and take those banners down, you know, and get rid of the gold. You know, we have to have a very specific action agenda, not just to roll back what's been done in damage, but to move us forward and leapfrog into real democracy.
Wonderful. Similarly, for Tavis Smiley, how has the national conversation around civil rights evolved in recent years?
I'm not sure that it has much, for starters. Let me start, if I can, though, with a tribute to Dr. Carlisle. We are celebrating Black History Month, and we only celebrate Black History today because somebody did something yesterday. And there is no Black History to celebrate tomorrow if somebody doesn't do anything today. And in real time, you are doing some amazing work at Drew. They are blessed to have you. One more time for Dr. David Carlisle. They're blessed to have you at Drew, brother. Secondly, very quickly, I hope and pray that I am as lucid, as brilliant, as eloquent when I'm 90 plus as Dolores Huerta is. Always love being in her space. We were talking backstage before she came out. We have done a lot of stuff together, traveling around the world. We were in Venezuela together some years ago, talking with Hugo Chavez, and to look at what's happened in Venezuela and us going under the cover of darkness and kidnapping people's presidents. But we had a good talk backstage about some of the work we've done together. To my friend Connie Rice, ain't nobody like her. Connie, we love you, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. We just love you. And I'm blessed to have Connie as a regular contributor on that radio show on KBLA that Dr. Carlisle mentioned, and to Thomas and Joanna, who I respect immensely. Honored to be on the panel with you. To your question now about the way the conversation has shifted, I was thinking as Connie was talking about the kind of leaders that we need in this moment. And I have a very simple definition of leadership, and it goes like this. You can't lead people unless you love people. And you can't save people unless you serve people. You can't lead if you don't love, and you can't save if you don't serve. And by love, I simply mean that everybody is worthy just because. Everybody is equally worthy just because. That's what Dolores was talking about. It's not about your annual income. It's not about what neighborhood you live in, what kind of car you drive, how much money you make, who your mom and them are, what kind of hookup and access you have. Every one of us, where you went to school, what your pedigree is, every one of us is equally worthy just because. Everybody's somebody's child, everybody's somebody's kid, and we're all worthy just because. Nothing else needs to matter. And I find that when we tap into that definition of the kind of leadership that we need, leadership that loves us and serves us, then we can have a different kind of conversation. And speaking of service, Connie quoted Dr. King. I'm going to quote Dr. King as well. King said that anybody can be great because anybody can serve. All it takes is a heart full of grace and a soul that's generated by love. This conversation that we ought to be having across the nation, Dr. Carlisle, about the kinds of leaders that we really need in this moment, given what Connie said so eloquently, is a conversation that we can't tap into at the level that I want to tap into it. Because I look around, I don't see the kind of leaders who are loving and serving us as they have done in the past. I remember some years ago speaking to a high school, a junior high school, in fact, and I asked the kids in this auditorium in this school, outside of their mama and their daddy, raise your hand if you know anybody in the public universe who you believe loves you enough to die for you. Not your mama, not your daddy. Anybody who advances themselves, promotes themselves as a leader in civil and human rights, who you believe loves you enough to die for you. And not a single hand went up in that classroom. Now, if I'd asked that question 50 years ago or 75 years ago, there's a long list of folk they could have mentioned who they believed, who in fact showed that they loved them enough to put their lives on the line and to die for them. And so the paradigm has shifted. And what Connie was saying is we have to build a new construct. And I think that new construct starts with making sure that we advance, that we promote, that we get behind the kind of leaders who we believe truly love us by showing in the kind of public policy they want to advance that they believe that all of us are equal, and they're willing to serve us by getting out of the way and putting the people first. And so as I sit in my chair every day in the studio, I'm looking for the kinds of folk who I think fit that description. Those who love, those who are willing to serve. And it's hard to, frankly, in this moment, it's hard to tap into a long list of persons who I think fit that particular bill. So the conversation, back to your question, about civil rights needs to shift to the kind of servant leaders that we're looking for, in this moment. And sadly, I think we're bereft of that, if I am being honest. Hope that answers your question a little bit.
Wonderful, Tavis. Thank you very much. California is blessed with some great philanthropic organizations. Our policy agenda is often informed, financed, and led by philanthropic organizations, our foundations. And one of those here with us today is the Weingart Foundation. Joanna Jackson, what now is philanthropy's role in advancing civil rights, and how has it evolved, especially here in Los Angeles?
Good question. Thank you. I first just want to say, Dr. Carlisle, thank you for the invitation. It is such an honor to be sitting on the stage with Connie Rice, Tavis Smiley, Thomas Saenz, to share a stage with the legendary Dolores Huerta. It's just an honor. So thank you for inviting me into this conversation. So philanthropy has a role, can have a role. I also want to be really clear. Movements, our leaders, those kind of servant leaders, are going to do the work whether philanthropy shows up or not. So it's really a question about how we're going to show up, how we're going to move in partnership. For me, at the Weingart Foundation, where our mission is to advance racial, social, economic justice for all, I actually think is not a question, right? It's actually a responsibility. Understanding how wealth was created for a lot of foundations, including ours in this country, wealth that was extracted from communities of color, Black communities in particular. Our wealth was created through real estate development. I feel a responsibility to correct that wealth gap that was created, that we helped to exacerbate, and give back. So staying committed to justice, advancing movements for justice, I actually see as a responsibility for philanthropy like ours. So what does that mean? Philanthropy needs to also think about how it's going to transform itself, right? We have to, if we're going to drive transformational change, then we can't stay in what I would say maybe is more status quo philanthropy that's often looking at incremental progress, right? Connie, you just literally gave us the roadmap. We are talking about meeting this moment. This is long-term change. And I actually want to, if you could give me a moment, I want to pull up. I literally just came across a group of foundations. If you could just let me tell this story for a second, and I'll come back. In the 50s and 60s, called the Freedom Funders. So these were 4 family foundations, relatively small to mid-sized foundations, who in the midst of the civil rights movement decided they were going to collectively pour resources into our Black-led civil rights organizations at a time when philanthropy was not funding, right, civil rights movements, right, when at a time they thought charity alone would be the way to get there, right? They, for 10 years, pooled their money, willing to invest, did not meddle at all in strategy, in trying to figure out, right, dictating how to do the work, but being willing to invest over a 10-year period, starting in 1955, when people actually didn't even think that actually advancing civil rights through legislation would actually even happen, right? But they did it over the long haul, collectively. At one point, I think they were even paying up to 25% of SNCC's operating budget, so significant amount of money over a 10-year period. Philanthropy clearly was not responsible for the wins or the victories. But the point is, when people thought it was dangerous, it wasn't smart, it was too risky, it wouldn't work, they did it anyway and funded them through the passage of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and actually then pushed foundations like Ford Foundation to really, in the 1960s, step into wanting to fund the movement. So I share that story to say philanthropy could have a catalytic role, right? We're not the answer. It's gonna happen without us. But we can decide at this point, are we gonna sit back in comfort and in fear? Or are we gonna stand up and be courageous the way folks out in community are being courageous because they have no choice? And stand with them and fund in a way that is gonna allow them to do it, in a way that allows them to take care of themselves, to pay their people, to be in this work for the long haul. And that is what I feel a responsibility to do. And in this moment, not just do that alone as Weingart Foundation, but actually how do we do it collectively? That's the other lesson, right? Because I think traditionally there's a lot of, what can my foundation do? What can I put my name on? And that's fine, right? That's fine. But at this point in time, I don't think we have a choice to think about what our own individual thing is gonna be. How are we leveraging collectively to meet the moment, to actually fund movements, to fund innovation, and to think about where do we want to be on the other side of this, right? We get to be that innovative capital, right? We get to support people that are thinking about the innovation right now. What will it look like? Like you said, we can't get to the other side and allow status quo to come back. When things are being torn down, we get to think about building anew, and we should be fueling that kind of innovation now. We should be seeding those kind of creative leaders now. So that's I think, the role that philanthropy should be playing, and that means larger sums of money. That means not just sitting comfortable with the 5%. That means thinking about using our entire endowment, use every resource that we have. That means using our voice. We are in a narrative battle right now. How are you funding, right, the kind of stories and narrative? How are we lifting up leaders and stories? use every tool that we have. That's what I see as the role for philanthropy now, and the opportunity that, and a privilege that I think we need to step into at this moment.
Joanna, thank you very much. Let's go on to Thomas Saenz. And you've argued cases at the highest levels of our legal system, some of the most famous cases in our legal system. What role does the judiciary play today in protecting or reshaping civil rights? Will that institution hold up?
So the bottom line is we need the courts. We depend on the courts today because they're the only branch that is not wholly owned by the White House. The legislative branch under its current leadership has basically conceded all power to the White House. And that's why this November's elections are so critical to make the change that's necessary in that legislative branch. So all we have of the three branches is the judiciary. Now, we all know that that's a mixed bag. We have some very bad judges. I could give you line and verse about judges today who are ruling based on political preference, based on fealty to Donald Trump, and not based on what the law is. But we have other judges who are courageous and are stepping forward and saying no. So the responsibility of all of us is to support those judges, support those justices, make sure that they are not being threatened with impeachment, they're not being threatened with violence, as we have seen. And we need to make sure that more judges gain that courage. The responsibility for us in the legal community is to be bold. That's not what you hear a lot. We must be bold. Why? Because this is the opportunity, this is the chance to revisit the long-established limitations on civil rights in the courts that have no application today. So many of those limiting rulings from decades past were crafted in an era where there were accepted political norms that were accepted across the spectrum. And they were grounded in the understanding that those norms would prevail. We now have a situation where the White House and its allies, the MAGA troops throughout the country, don't accept political norms. So we have to revisit the rulings that were crafted based on an understanding that those norms would prevail. And we have to demand that our courts modernize and upgrade our civil rights jurisprudence to reflect now, not what it was like 2 decades ago when even the far right, the legitimate far right, accepted political norms in a way that have been rejected today. So not only are the courts our current bulwark, the one branch that potentially restrains the other two, but we have to use them in not just a defensive way, as we must. We have to defend birthright citizenship. We have to defend the right to vote against attempts to deter or suppress participation. We have to do those things. We can't do all that we have to do in the realm of defense. At Maldiv, we engage in more triage today than ever in my 30 years as a civil rights lawyer. We have to decide what's urgent and what can wait in a way that we didn't have to when there wasn't such a barrage daily of violations of the law. But while we do that defense, we have to be proactive and bold about trying to establish a jurisprudence for the future. Connie talked brilliantly about what's next. And in Trump 1, I used to say, after this administration is over, no one imagined a second such administration, that we had to plan. And because back then he was still taking whatever it was he was taking, you all recall he was orange. And I used to say that there is a Cheetos approach, which is you just look for everything with the orange fingerprints and you get rid of it, right? But that's not enough. As Connie said, we have to build for the future, a future that is more diverse, where there is no majority race, a future that must incorporate everyone. So we have to build beyond the Cheetos approach if he was still orange. I'm disappointed he's not, frankly, but we have to build beyond the Cheetos approach and have in place the plans to create the new future. And the judiciary is then going to have to be situated to defend those new approaches against the inevitable attacks that will be well-financed by the other side.
I'm going to turn around and come back down the panel. So a question for Joanna Jackson. As a leader shaped by nonprofit service and philanthropy, what do you believe drives sustainable and social change?
People. We need sustainable leaders, servant leaders, and we need strong institutions, right? We need strong institutions, and it can't be at the expense of folks' well-being. I think for a long time, folks in movement work the expectation, because you are a servant leader, because you are driven by mission, not profit, driven hopefully by love, that you will sacrifice, right? That it comes at the expense of you, your well-being. And I think we have an opportunity to do it differently right now as we think about what does sustainability look like into the future for those that are leading movements. So in line, if philanthropy is going to be a part of pushing that, we have to fund differently, right? We can't give partial funding and expect full delivery. We have to help folks understand what is the full cost of doing stuff, and we have to fund it. We have to fund people like we want them to win. And that means not in 1 year cycle or even 2 year cycle, right? I'm trying to push us to 4 year cycle, 5 year cycle. People need to know that there is support so they could plan, right? How are you planning for our future when you don't know if you got money next year? And I know I'm saying this as a funder, easy to say, right? And folks don't receive it. So I say it, these are the conversations that I'm having with foundation CEOs right now as we have a whole new generation of leadership coming up in philanthropy, particularly in LA. If we want sustainability, we have to support people in achieving it, right? Fund folks' wellness and care, right? People need to have health care. People need to be able to take a vacation. That is the expectation now, and we have to pour into folks so they can do that. So we need to be building leaders, investing in leaders. We need to be building pipelines, right? How are we bringing young people into this work and build strong, stable institutions, right? And values-driven leadership.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Coming back to Tavis Smiley, a similar question. Media plays a critical role in shaping public infrastructure and understanding. How does it influence which issues gain attention and which are ignored?
How much time do I have? If you allow me very quickly, a note of personal privilege. I looked out here and I think I see my friend Dr. Deborah Proto-Stith sitting. Is that Deborah? There she is. Yeah, let's give her some love. Love Dr. Deborah Proto-Stith. Yesterday, Dr. Carlisle, we had our annual, KBLA had our annual Black History Month luncheon. And every year we honor a particular group of people who are loving and serving us. We do this every Black History Month. And so yesterday we programmed Joanna a little, what I would call, in my business, we call it counter programming. So given all the hell that we're enduring, that we've all spoken to so far, this grim and dark moment that we find ourselves in, we went the other way yesterday and honored these comedians, iconic comedians who bring us the kind of levity we need, make us laugh in tough times. And God knows that if we don't laugh right about now, we're going to be crying all the time. And so yesterday we honored Dave Chappelle and Martin Lawrence and D.L. Hughley and Melanie Camacho and Earthquake. And they were all there yesterday at a celebration. But I thought about that because we honored Dr. Deborah last year. Deborah was one of our honorees last year for the great work she's doing at Drew. And so we're honored to always be in conversation and in collaboration with her. To your question about media, let me just unpack very quickly what we mean. Connie always says, and I started smiling the minute she said it because she does it all the time. Connie always tells me, get your frame right, You heard her talking today about that frame, very important. Get your frame right, Negro. And so I want to make sure our frame is right when we talk about media. There is what I would call corporate media, and there's independent media. Corporate media, or in my world, black-owned media, as KBLA Talk 1580 is. And what we see is an abdication of the responsibility that media used to have in this country. Media has become so corporatized that it decides what it wants to cover. It decides what it wants to talk about. And in so many ways, we see media now preaching to the choir, so that if you want your opinions reinforced, then you watch Fox. If you want your opinions reinforced, you watch CNN or maybe MS, whatever it is now, MS Now. You watch that. So that people are so siloed these days, and we turn to these networks who can make us feel better about what we have determined to be the truth. So there is no objective or standard of what truth is these days. It's whatever the truth is whatever we determine it to be. And we turn to those media outlets that reinforce whatever those notions are that we already believe in. And so what we try to do at our station and other independent outlets that I'm in contact with, we try, and again, Connie's my partner in this, we challenge folk to re-examine the assumptions that they hold. We try to help folk expand their inventory of ideas and to see the world through a different prism. And with that said, those of us who are persons of color in media right now, David, are being disappeared. We're being disappeared in corporate media. So the role of independent media is more necessary and more relevant now than ever before. There's certain questions that don't get asked if we don't ask them. Certain topics that don't get traversed if we don't traverse them. A lot of folk doing great work who don't get profiled if we don't profile them. So that the role of independent, and again, in my world, black-owned media is more relevant and necessary now than ever before in the history of this country. We all recall just a couple months ago when Donald Trump and Republicans, after years of trying, finally got around to do what they wanted to do, which is to line item out of the federal budget NPR and PBS. I know this well, having spent years at NPR and PBS. I support both of those public media institutions, and yet I'm the first to tell you something is wrong when a person of my age is the first person of color in the history of NPR to host a daily show at that network. I was that guy. And the first person of color on PBS every night to have his own show. I was that guy. Something is wrong with that. So we got to do better at NPR and PBS by serving all of us. I shouldn't have been the first guy in the door to host his own show 5 nights a week on either of those platforms. And yet, I support the work of public media. So Donald Trump, Republicans line item them out. And what happens? Thankfully, philanthropy shows up overnight to raise $100 million to shore up NPR and to shore up NPS. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Anybody done that for black media? Anybody done that for brown media? So we're out here struggling every day, pushing up against a headwind to try to make sure that we are bringing you the truth that the mainstream media, the corporate media, wants to put its head in the sand about. I literally had on our program a couple of days ago Al Green, not that Al Green. I'm so tired of being up. No, not that Al Green. The other Al Green, the congressman out of Texas, who you saw get escorted out of the speech the other night for the second time. I said, Negro, you just love getting kicked out of rooms. So he got kicked out last year, and they kicked him out this year for holding up a sign that said, black people aren't apes. You recall that sign, black people aren't apes. Al Green held that sign up, wanted Donald Trump to see it, and they escorted him out of the room. And Al Green came on the program and said, Tavis, I'm honored to talk about what happened last night. We jumped into the conversation. He said, well, I asked you, what was motivating you? What animated you beyond the obvious that Donald Trump posted this video? What animated you? What motivated you to do that? He said, I am sick and tired. I'm like Fannie Lou Hamer, sick and tired of being sick and tired of the mainstream corporate media hitting and quitting these important stories. They'll hit it and they'll quit it. The news cycle shifts. And so he was saying to me that here is a sitting U.S. president who's tapped into one of the oldest and nastiest and most vicious racial tropes, comparing black folk to apes. And the mainstream media talked about it for 24 hours and went right on past it. Nobody demanded an apology of Donald Trump. Nobody has stayed on this story. That's where independent, black-owned, brown-owned media matter in moments like these. And so I don't want to overstate it, but we have to unpack what we mean. Again, back to Connie, get your frame right. When we talk about media, there's this amorphous term, it has to be broken down. And so I am committed for whatever time I have left to make sure that those of us who are in independent media do our job, take our responsibility serious to save this democracy from, or as Connie would say, this experiment in democracy, to save it from itself. So the role of independent media is more important now, and I hope that those of you who are listening today will do your part to support independent media. When they ask for your support them in the ways that you can, because when there are 2 or 3 people, and we can call their names, who own all the media that we consume, ain't but 2 or 3 of them. I'm disappointed, and tell him I said it, in the owner of the LA Times. I'm sick of the way the LA Times is showing up these days, or not showing up, as it were, under their ownership. I'm sick of the way the Washington Post, under Mr. Bezos, is showing up or not showing up these days. Mainstream media has lost their ever-loving minds. And we have got to do our part to make sure that somebody is on the front lines of reporting and sharing and researching and investigating and bringing you the news that you need to hear. So the media has a very important role to play. And there's some issues, very quickly, there's some issues that don't get covered, again, if we don't cover them. Here in LA and here in California, we're pleased to be partnering with, for example, St. John's Community Health. We're partnering with them on a very important proposition that you're going to be hearing a great deal more about, because healthcare is such a critical issue in our community. And we believe, and we assert at KBLA, not unlike Drew, that healthcare is a right. It is not a privilege. Healthcare, I said again, is a right. It is not a privilege. And so we're covering these stories and trying to advance these issues with St. John and others to make sure that the issues that matter to us are pushed higher on the American agenda. I'm sorry for going so long, but you asked me about media, you get me excited, man.
There you go. Absolutely. I want to come back to Attorney Rice and just ask her a question about changing intractable organizations, even hostile organizations. Most of us here today are either health professionals, many of us are, or aspiring to be health professionals. But we all know young people who want to be attorneys also, who want to change the system and work within the legal system. How would you change a hostile organization such as the LAPD?
Well, yeah, given that I did that, I guess I could talk about it. In the right frame, when you litigate, you're the outsider. You're outside the castle and you're lobbing stuff over the moat, right? You're storming the castle from the outside, right? That's a game of forcing an institution to comply with laws that you have an instrument to force them to. So you're in an arena of a court, you're in the frame of litigation. Courts can't tell a cop to look at a dark-skinned black child in Nickerson Gardens and say, instead of I get to shoot him or arrest him or use him to rack up my stats, instead, look at that little boy and say, I love him. Courts can't do that. That's hearts and minds. That's not fact and law. So hostile organizations, you've got to map what makes them tick, okay? What's their formal culture, what's their informal culture? And then you have to find your way in. I had to go from combat to seduction. Because when you infiltrate, you're seducing, you're persuading, you're winning their hearts and minds. Cops won't follow you unless they love you. And I found the cops who were decent. How did I know they were good cops? I know that for a lot of advocates, there's no such thing as a good cop. I found out they were good cops because I've been doing this a long time. I've earned every white hair on my head. 40 years ago, LAPD had death squads. That sounds ridiculous, right? But I found out, because I didn't understand my limitations, I would go down to Watts at night at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning because I needed to see what was going on when graveyard shift was on and when the gangs were actually doing their dirty stuff, because the gangs lie to you, the cops lie to you. The only people who told me the truth were the people at King Drew. I would go to King Drew Emergency and find out who got shot. Then I'd go over to Jordan and Nick, and I'm wandering around at 1 o'clock. What was wrong with me? I just didn't understand what I couldn't do. But it was the only way. If you're not getting ground intel, you don't know what's going on, right? You got to be there, right? And I thought I was incognito. Stupid, I stuck out like a sore thumb, light, bright, damn near white, walking around Watts at 1 o'clock in the morning. What was I thinking? So I'm in my office at LDF doing litigation with Tom in those days against LAPD, and I got a call in my office. It was a cop in a phone booth, a white cop in a phone booth, whispering, "Miss Rice, don't come down to Watts tonight. Graveyard is gunning for you, and I can't protect you." Cops told me that graveyard shift, which did, now they're gone now. We don't have any death squads anymore. We've got other problems. We got Bernard Parks got rid of the death squads, even though I helped get him out of office. I give him 1,000% credit for that. He got rid of the cops who were hunter killers. Okay? Can you imagine the impunity that they would go after a nationally renowned civil rights lawyer and thought that they could kill her? The good cops said no. I started bonding with them. It was my way in, okay? I always said I liked Charlie Beck the first time I sued him. Lawsuits are like shotgun marriages. You get to know each other real well, okay? All right? Don't really want to, but you're gonna get to know each other real well. We got to know each other real well and found out, well, wait a minute, why are we fighting? I'm a protector of civil rights. You're supposed to be a guardian of the Constitution. I'm supposed to be a guardian of the Constitution. Why are we fighting? Found the common ground, found the common humanity. He started saying, it's like the gang member said, "You're the craziest ass bitch we've ever loved." Cops felt the same way. I got them to love me because I decided I needed to help them. With good cops, my job wasn't to condemn all policing. It was to help the good cops take over the culture, because it was graveyard that controlled the culture. It took us 15 years. But with the good cops and professional gang intervention that Weingart helped fund and set up along with the Pat Brown Institute, we created, with Mrs. Tolliver and a whole bunch of community leaders and mothers who had gang members for sons and mothers who didn't, abuelas and grandmothers who lived in Nickerson and Jordan Downs and Ramona Gardens. We took on the mission of providing safety, not enforcement, but safety, a health concept for underclass Latinos and African Americans. And we did it with the help of cops who didn't see dark-skinned little black boys as fodder to kill, but looked at them and said, "We want them to thrive." That took flipping from combat to infiltration and seduction to becoming partners. And at this stage, there are cops I consider family members, and they consider me family members. So it's a process, but you have to switch. I also represented a Klansman on death row. That's a long story. But I opened my big mouth and told LDF that it was immoral to have a national moratorium on the death penalty and only represent African American inmates. Because if you only represent one race of inmate, you expedite the death dates of all the others, and it's based on race. And I found that immoral. So they gave me all of the white death row defendants. And a number of them had the teardrop, they killed people in prison, and one was a serial killer, and one was a white Aryan nationalist and a Klansman. And I fought like a dragon to save his life, because I'm a professional. And when I met him, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, great, they sent me a yellow cunt." And I said, just a second, I've never been called that before. Let me write that down. Yellow cunt, I underlined it, and I said, that's going in my memoir. I said, this yellow cunt is the only thing standing between you and the electric chair down the road, okay? Do you want my help or not? He was a serial killer who had been created by the state of North Carolina. He was so brutalized that of the 9 children in that family, all of the males were in life in prison. He was on death row. And the girls were dead by the time they were 25. 60 Minutes did a story on this family. It had a foot of feces on the floor. I mean, it was just an awful, awful thing. And the state of North Carolina then put them in foster care, and that was run by a pedophile ring. How to create a serial killer, 101. Ask the state of North Carolina. I found his humanity by looking at him and saying, I know you hate me. I know that if I let you out, you would kill me. But I don't think the state should kill you. They created you. They are stopped from killing you. And I fought to keep him alive. When I left law school and was someplace else, couldn't continue to represent him. But at his final death date, before his execution, he wrote a note to me. He was illiterate, as a lot of people in prison are. He was illiterate. And so he wrote in the English that he had, "You were the only one who helped me." We found each other's humanity. That's how you do it.
Connie, thank you.
I get one question. Everybody else gets yours.
So I'm going to ask our panelists to give a last comment. We have about 10 minutes left in our session, and we'll start with Thomas Saenz. Anything that, or what would you say most significantly at this point as a closing remark?
Well, there's no question, but the November election is the most important in our lives. And I know that's cliched because I've heard it since I started voting in 1984. But it is as true for this election as it has been for anyone in the history of this country. We are at a turning point. And the turning starts with the outcome of the November election. And that means that we do the work now. We do the work now to ensure that the outcome is different, or they will put in place changes that will permanently align this country against the people. So I'm not worried about birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court will get that right. I am worried about what will come around the corner when they try to change the structure of the census to discount undocumented people entirely. And that will have long-term political repercussions. And that can be prevented by the outcome of this November's election. So we can't be satisfied when they get birthright citizenship right and think the judiciary is going to save us. The one question you asked me, it was about the judiciary. They can't save us. That's never been the case. It's the people that can save us, and the moment is now for this election.
Thank you. And Joanna Jackson.
I remind myself all the time when we have really hard days or really bad news that we have been here before. We have not experienced this, right, in our lifetime, but the regression, the backlash since the founding of this country, right, whether it's post-Reconstruction, Jim Crow, McCarthy era, we can go on and on. We have been here before. And it is up to every generation, it's their responsibility to continue that progress, right? So I just remind us, we are the ones right now, right? We are the ones that are sitting in the seats who have to show up and make sure that, yes, we protect these elections and continue to build forward, right? I feel like we don't have a choice. I'm only sitting on this stage because there were folks under conditions that I could not even fathom, had to continue to fight, had to find a way, had to continue to dream for generations, for an experience that they knew they themselves would not have. So I ask myself, what do I want the future generations to say about what we did at this time? Because they will be looking back at this moment in history. It is our responsibility. Show up with courage, show up with love, and I think there's not an option to show up without hope, right? We gotta hope, we gotta do the work, we gotta push forward. And now's the time to, you said it, Connie, do it in a way that we're actually inviting people in. We gotta build the bigger tent, the bigger we, the greater will to push forward and build something new. Now's our time.
Thank you, Joanna. Tavis Smiley, the same question.
Let me build on what Joanna Jackson just brilliantly and eloquently shared. I also believe that the eyes of the future are looking back at us. These black, brown, red, yellow babies yet unborn are looking back at us and hoping that we see beyond our own time. They're looking back at us and hoping that we get this critical American moment right. I don't want to be found wanting in that regard. I want to make sure that I show up in the way that I need to show up in a grim American moment like this where we are experiencing the night side of America. I return to Dr. King, who Connie quoted earlier and I quoted earlier. I come back to him always because I regard Dr. King, it's my own assessment, as the greatest American this country's ever produced. And I believe that the future of this democracy you're experimenting in is inextricably linked to how seriously we take the legacy of Dr. King. What is that legacy? Glad you asked. Justice for all, service to others, and a love that liberates people. Justice for all, service to others, and a love that liberates people. King, Dr. Carlisle, famously said, cowardice asks, is it safe? Expediency asks, is it politic? Vanity asks, is it popular? But conscience asks, is it right? And every now and then we must take positions that are neither comfortable, safe, politic, nor convenient, but we do it because our conscience tells us that it's right. Finally, to the point that Joanna made about hope, I make a distinction always between optimism and hope. They are not the same thing. Optimism suggests there's a particular set of facts, circumstances, conditions, something you can see, feel, or touch that gives you reason to believe that things are going to get better. And so you say, based on X, Y, or Z, I'm optimistic. That ain't the moment that we're in. This is a moment of being hopeful. I dare not proselytize, but the Bible that I read says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So even when we don't have the evidence to believe that we are going to come out of this moment, we can build lives on hope. And there's so many of us in this room, that's all we've ever had. Hope is all we have ever had. And I believe that hope could use a little help right about now. But I also believe that when we can't be optimistic, we can and we must always remain hopeful. Thank you, Dr. Carlisle.
Thank you. And Connie Rice.
Thank you for putting this program together and bringing us all together. It's been a privilege to be with panelists and with this audience. The thing that keeps me up at night is that while we're talking about what we can touch as the problems and what we can see in terms of being around the corner, I don't think there's ever been a point in time when there were more existential threats pointed at us at one time. I don't know if it's as big as the comet that eliminated the dinosaurs and actually allowed us to evolve, but it's as big as fire. We've got threats, technological threats that may end civilization, and we don't have a plan. We don't even understand what they are. We've got incoming that we're not looking at, we're not engaging. We're going to have heads up, head on a swivel, because there are multiple threats. It's not just the ending of democracy. It's not just the rollback of civil rights, which is, we talk about this because these are our jobs and we engage on this stuff every day, but there are huge threats. We are in a moment of dislocation and fracture that is global, environmental. Just take climate change. We don't even talk about it. Talk about issues we don't even talk about. Guess who's going to pay that price? It's the poor and it's third world countries that are paying it now. We don't even talk about it. We don't have the strategies. We're not even admitting that we've got that incoming. So what keeps me up at night is what we're not looking at. And I don't think there's ever been a time, certainly not in my life, I don't know if there's been a time in this century, even with the retraction of Reconstruction and the rise of the Jim Crow, the rise of the new Jim Crow with mass incarceration, even with all of those systemic threats, they're single. They're about one system. They're not civilization destroying. They destroy communities. They destroy poor black and poor brown communities. They are not destroying the entire human civilization infrastructure. We better get our heads out of the sand, on a swivel. We need to map all of the threats that are incoming. I'm a military kid. We need SAC, TAC, MET. Military Air Command, Strategic Air Command, Logistical Air Command. I mean, we need the whole multi-domain military framework, because if you don't understand what's incoming, you're going to get bombed. So that's what keeps me up at night. What gives me hope is remembering what my grandmother told me when I had the nerve to complain about Ronald Reagan one time. And she said, until you've had to sit in the dark in your Birmingham kitchen at midnight with a long gun over your knee waiting for the Klan, you have not earned the right to despair. Get up, get out there, take that baton and run like the wind. You stand on privilege. You don't have it hard. So just remember, we come from giants. People died for us to be free. Let's make sure we pay that debt forward.
Well, I think we have time for a couple of questions from our audience, and what I will do is, if you have a question, stand up, and our microphone holders will come to you. When you have a question, I'd like to ask that you direct it to one member of our panel, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Cristina Sanchez. I am Vice President of Public Affairs for Altamed Health Services. We're the largest federally qualified health center in the nation, with a proud partnership with CDU with our nursing program. My question is for Tom Saenz as it relates to healthcare. I want to talk about healthcare access as we're moving into equity. We're living in an era now to what health equity looks like, into pre-civil rights era. HR 1, many other factors. Give us some ideas of what the safety net looks like for our community. And anybody else is welcome to answer as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Of course, as you know, the safety net is eroding, and it's happening under the radar, by and large, because of some of the depredations occurring under this administration that hit the headlines more. And one of the things that has disappointed me the most, as you know, is even our most progressive states have backed off from the realignment that ensured that there was healthcare access for all. So while that temporary victory lasted just a few years of ensuring that even the undocumented had access to healthcare, and as soon as budgets became tight, and Connie explained as well as anyone that they're really not as tight as they act, it's a matter of priority setting. And we learned that our allies placed such a low priority on that some of our folks have been denied health care that they had access to for just a few years. And that is, to me, the most dangerous erosion. We have a trend in this country, and you see it in the law. The right wing has been setting up conflicts of rights. One person has a right, other person has a right. These are cases like Hobby Lobby. These are cases like the Masterpiece Cake Shop, where they are setting up specific clashes of rights. And I tell folks there are two ways that you can see resolving those clashes of rights. One is creating a hierarchy of rights, and the other, and more pernicious, is creating a hierarchy of rights holders. And that, to me, is the more dangerous possibility here, and we're unfortunately seeing it play out in what I've just described.
Thank you. Chair Baucus.
This question will be for Ms. Rice. As a white guy, how do I have a conversation with white haters to find that humanity that you're talking about? Because I can barely talk to some family members today, and I think I can do as much as anybody else if I can have a dialogue with other white people who I view haters.
Well, I find that the racial dynamics are best done not through talk, but through association and experience. My question is never, is someone racist? My question is, what do you do with the racialized, race-adjacent, and racist-ish stuff in your head? Everybody has it. My question is, can we find a way to connect? It's the proximity. I have found that even just, I'll never forget, for example, when I was talking to cops, when I was finally inside and learning their fears, learning what they needed. One cop came up to me and he said, "Ms. Rice, can I tell you something?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I don't think you'll use it against me." He said, "I'm afraid of black people. I'm terrified every time I leave my station and go out into Grape Street." And he said, "I never grew up around black people, and I'm terrified." And I said, "Let me tell you, would you be willing to come with me and just go to the Easter picnic in the park?" And then I took him to dinner with a family in Jordan Downs. And he slowly, and plus his association with me, I said, "You know, I'm the whitest person you can be and still be black. So a lot of white people who deal with me, they think they can deal with black folks." And I tell, "No, I'm adjacent, you know." I grew up in all white communities, Europe, the Pacific Rim. We moved 17 times in 22 years. I learned to curtsy to Queen Elizabeth, and I had tea at 4. Okay, I speak the King's English to the Queen's taste and the Exchequer's delight. I am about as white as you can get. So, but I'm so fluent in both all cultures and classes and can cross those things. Code breaker, I write new codes. So, code switcher, no, So I think that rather than talking, because it's not about concepts, it's about heart, it's about feeling. So if you can, I don't know, bring a black friend to dinner. just tell them, "Hey, indulge me." The racism will come out. You know, how do you do your hair? You know, you're so articulate. You know, it'll come out in all kinds of ways. It always does. But I'm tolerant enough to let that stuff go. Because once I get that stuff out of the way, I find that a few years later down the road, they've actually grown. Now, you got to be patient, and most folks aren't going to have that patience. But I find that real change along the racial lines, breaking down those barriers, has to be experiential. And you have to have enough goodwill to really want to do it. For folks who are hostile, I sometimes use humor. You know, I make them laugh. I'll just say the exact opposite of what, I'll confirm some racist stuff that they've said, and they'll look at me like, what, she. I'll use the reverse psychology. But you have to understand what you can do in terms of your racial acumen and how fluent you are. If you're talking about your family, my law partner, Molly Munger, just tells me all the time, I do not understand why white people can't see how incredible black people are. I just don't get it. She's 0.001% of the population, and you might be with her. So just understand those limitations. But it's not about debating policy. You're not going to change people that way. I find that you have to go about it in an indirect way, and you have to have it through experience.
Well, I think this brings us to the end of this morning's program. Before we go forward, I just want to thank and recognize the philanthropic partners who've made it possible. The W.M. Keck Foundation, the California Community Foundation, UniHealth Foundation, the Max Factor Family Foundation, Mr. John Coleman, and the California Endowment. And thank you to everyone in the audience for being here today and being part of this discussion, in fact, making it possible. I want to recognize also the esteemed panel that we have here today, who's also contributed so much. Thomas Saenz, Joanna Jackson, Tavis Smiley, and Connie Rice. But also, thank you to all of our university staff who are here with us today. You've seen them in action. They do a wonderful job. And also thank you to the Colburn School for being such a wonderful host of this event year after year. Well, we are done. I will see everyone next year. Thank you for being here.